to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He's the author of the new novel, Spin Kick. No other than Mr. Mike Lukas.
Yes, your brother from another mother.
Yes, indeed.
How you
So,
doing,
can
Danny?
you please introduce more about yourself, Mr. Mike Lukas?
Sure. My name is Mike Lukas. I just wrote this book right here, Spin Kick, which is it's called The Hiss of Death. I'm an author. I'm out of Dallas, Texas, and I have been writing since I was a little kid. And I've written this is my seventh book that I've written. So I'm very happy with it. It's a vigilante martial arts vigilante crime thriller, and it is a book about five different characters that all uh, come together at the end, and it's based on it's loosely based on a true story that I heard of when I was a comedian traveling around, and I wanted to take that and turn it into a novel. And so it took me a couple of years to do it, but I finally got it done, and I just released the book last week, and I'm very excited. I'm hoping that people will get into it. So far, it's been very good reviews.
Mr. Mike Lukas, thank you so much for sharing your spin kick to
The
the
studio
world.
audience loved it.
Yay! So, what inspired you to write this spin kick?
Well, it was a story that was inside of me for a long time, and I knew this other story that there was a comedian who was not a nice guy. He was look, I'm being attacked by my cats here. Um, there was a comedian that was a rapist, and he was evading being caught. And I always thought that was weird how he evaded being caught, which is I decided to use that as a story base. And it was a story that what came out of me because I love Jack Reacher. I don't know if you know Lee Child's character Jack Reacher, and then I also always loved Kung Fu, the show with David Carradine, where he would go around, travel around, and have to use his martial arts to defend himself. And so I wanted to get a book that was sort of in the same sort of feel as those two coming together. And so I wanted to have a traveler. And so my guy Ted, he's my main guy, my main protagonist. And Ted travels around the country in his F-150 pickup truck that tows an Airstream, and so he lives basically on the road. And he, in the story, he's got a situation. His father just died. His father was a Vietnam vet, and his father just died a pretty rough death, and he's trying to get over it. The son is trying to get over it, and in the meantime, he finds out that his father is not going to be interred where he was supposed to be. So he has to come back and get his ashes. And so that's part of the whole first part of the book is him returning and dealing with the people that he confronts along the way. But in the end, the justice prevails, and we our bad guy is caught. But it takes a little bit of a while, and it takes a detective who is also struggling. He has his own drinking problems, and he has his own ghosts from his past that he's dealing with. And he is another lead protagonist in the story. He and his son. So it's a combination of these stories that come together, and it's really it's about courage. The book is about do you have the guts to face your worst nightmare? Do you have the guts to face the thing that you are most afraid of? And can you stay true to yourself when you're facing that horror? And one of our characters in the another protagonist in the book is her name is Marcy, and she's a student, and she's going to be a potential victim. And then she's a kind of a weak character until the end when she proves herself to be strong. And so we watch her growth throughout the book and see her really find her own truth in the novel.
So, Mr. Mike, how did you come up with the title and what does it symbolize?
Well, that's a good question. Spin kick. I knew I wanted to call it spin kick because throughout the whole, this guy Ted, he's our main protagonist. He is an excellent spin kicker. He learned how to do the move when he was a young child, when he was learning martial arts with his father, who was a military vet. And so what they said is their martial arts mentor, who's called uh, well, he's got uh, a full name, but they nickname him Master X. And Master X said that um, when you do a spin kick correctly, the air molecules split in such a way that they hiss at their own death. And so his spin kick was one of the few that caused the hiss of death to occur. And that's the hiss of death of all those molecules that the spin kick has killed. But really, the hiss of death is talks about um, the closeness that Ted gets in this story to his own death, and he's saved in the end, believe it or not, by his father in a way. So we find out that there's a way that the father is still in his life that allows him to survive a near death experience.
So, let's talk about the story and characters. Who is the main protagonist and what drives their vigilant justice?
Well, Ted Roosevelt is the main protagonist, and he has been a spin kicker and a martial arts specialist since he was little. And so his what drives him is he's trying to he's overcome with grief, and he is trying to figure out how to deal and handle with the grief of losing a father who raised him after having already lost his mother. And it's his only remaining family in the world, and he finds out that his father needs him because the place that his ashes are stored no longer is going to be no longer open, and so he has to travel and go back and uh, grab his dad's ashes. And so part of what drives him is just the is going to protect his dad and his dad's remains. And part of what drives him though is he's a real justice seeker. His he has a real sense of what's right and what's wrong, and he hates that anyone can take advantage of a weakling, of people. And so his whole idea is that his spin kick was given to him in order to protect those people, and so that's what he does.
So, what role does martial arts play in shaping the story and characters?
Well, the at first we were just driven by um, going and getting his father's ashes, and then what we find out is that his world collides with the world of the uh, uh, the antagonist, and the two of them end up in a battle. And it's not the first time they've battled. I don't want to ruin the story for people. I don't want to be a spoiler,
Spoilers.
but the two of them have a history, and they end up clashing in the end, and only one can win, and luckily justice prevails.
Certainly. So, does the book feature a main antagonist and what makes them formidable?
Well, yeah, this guy, he's a comedian, and he's also he's very clever, and he's very smart, and he's very insidious. And so um, he's what drives him is an anger that he has towards life and towards women. He was abused when he was young, and he was uh, sort of not sexually abused, but he was verbally and physically abused by his parents, who were drunks. And that anger caused him to really resent the world, and caused him to be sort of an incapable of normal relationships. And instead, he seeks power. He seeks to dominate, and that's he had a feeling of being weak in his life, and he never wants to feel that again. So I think that that's what drives him throughout the book.
Certainly. So, Mr. Mike, let's talk about themes and action of Spin Kick. What are the key themes explored in Spin Kick?
Well, let's see. The main theme in Spin Kick is it's fear and it's courage. So when you're fearful, your choices are limited. When you're courageous, you're there is only one choice to make, which is the right choice, and that's sort of what this the theme of this book is a young woman figuring out who she is in the world, and how she is courageous, and it's also the protagonist's journey to find out if he's courageous enough to face his biggest enemy yet. And so I would say fear and courage would be the main themes that override this book.
So, Mr. Mike, how did you ensure the martial arts sequence felt authentic and
Mm.
intense?
Well, I took a little bit of Taekwondo myself, and I'm a
Right.
big fan of those types of movies and of that type of action. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to emulate Lee Child's fight scenes that he does with Jack Reacher. And by that, I mean he has the ability to think through his fighting in slow motion while and sharing that information with the reader. And then we get to see exactly how and why he's formulating his defenses and his offenses. And I really tried to stay true to that. I tried to give the reader a real detailed uh, experience with each and every confrontation that happened. And so I let them I let the characters sort of the main protagonist talk out sort of his thoughts of strategy and how he's fighting. And so that is how I get the fight scenes to sort of pop in there. And the I wanted to use um, words like plow and blam and stuff like that, like in the old Batman movies, but that doesn't work in a novel. So I had to really sort of verbally describe the action, and I feel like I've done it. One of the reviews said that it's wonderfully descriptive. So hopefully that holds true for every reader.
Interesting, Mr. Mike. Interesting.
Welcome,
So
Tom.
let's understand your writing process and inspiration. What were your biggest challenges in writing this book?
Well, the biggest challenge was I was learning how to write when I first came up with this idea. So I wasn't capable of writing it to the level that I wanted to write it when I first drafted it. So the big challenge was letting it sit for a while and becoming a better writer and publishing a couple of other books in the meantime while I was developing my writing skills. And when you're writing fiction, it's different than nonfiction. My other books are two of them, three of them, four of them are nonfiction, and they're those types of books are a different process. When you're writing nonfiction, there's a lot of a different kind of research going on, and there's a lot of functional writing happening. And with fiction, you're doing description and narrative, and you're doing dialogue. And so I had to learn how to do all those. I had to figure out how that works as a writer. And so it took me several years to, and I did the what I call the million word challenge. I made myself write a million words before I ever published anything, and that was it took me almost 2 years to do, but it was worth it because it was its own sort of college university of writing, and I went through and really challenged myself to uh, write at a level that people would appreciate. And that was the biggest challenge. And another challenge was, do you plot or do you let it come out of you? and some writers are plotters, and they're people who will write down outlines to their book. They'll do all character descriptions, and they'll have all that prepared before they ever write a word of their story. And those are called plotters. And I'm not a plotter. I what I do is I write the book, and it just comes through me the way Stephen King does it. And then in retrospect, you go back and you iron out your characters, and you iron out your story. And so that's how my process worked. I just wrote every day and let the words come through and let the story come through. And then it took me a couple of years to just edit those drafts and make it to a point where I felt like it was ready for readers to digest.
What was the most exciting scene for you to write?
Ooh, well, it has to be the climax scene, the big scene at the end where all the forces come together, and we find out that if the protagonist doesn't win, then the antagonist wins, and the story will go a whole different way at the end. And so it was a real challenge to figure out how to make the protagonist uh, come out ahead without making it seem too contrived or too predetermined. So we're not sure if justice is going to prevail in this one. We don't find out till the very end, and that was probably the most fun to write, that big climactic scene. But I had
Certainly.
fun writing all of it, to be honest. It's a journey. It's one guy traveling and trying to get his family situation settled. It's another guy trying to solve a crime. It's another guy who's trying to get away with crime. It's a woman, a young woman who's fearful and is going to be a victim, and we get to see how she overcomes those fears. And um, so there was a lot to write to get to the very climactic scene. So that I was really rewarding to write the big finale. And then one thing I like about the book, in the beginning, it starts out, the detective has a son. His name is Detective Harris, and his name is Cade. And Cade is his stepson. And Detective Harris is not a big fan of his stepson because his stepson was sort of given to him by his ex-wife, and who's no longer with them. And so he's become his sort of baggage to have to handle. And so that's a whole story in itself, the way those two relate. And so to watch Detective Harris go, in the beginning, he's bossing around his son who's trying to use the John Deere lawnmower, and he can't get it started. And so the father talks him through it, and the stepfather talks him through it, and finally it turns out that the lawnmower just starts. And in the end, the same situation happens, but in reverse. And so we see in the prologue, or the afterlog, we see that the situation has changed. And so that was a lot of fun to write, to have someone go from being the jerk to being the sort of the one who is in need. I
So,
don't want to
Mr.
give away any of the plot points. So it's
Spoilers.
hard to talk about it without being a spoiler. So I'm doing my best.
So, Mr. Mike, do you see a spin kick as the beginning of a series?
I think it could be. Yeah, I think that we might want to know what happens to Ted. In the end, he's off to his namesake, Ted Roosevelt, the president, is buried out in New York, and so that's where he says he's going at the end, was to go to see where his namesake was buried. And so I think that he could probably have another adventure on his way there, and when he gets there. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see how people, if people want it, I will definitely write it.
So, if this book were adapted into a film or series, who would you cast?
Well, that's a good question, because the protagonist is a half Vietnamese and half American. So they would have to be a biracial person, and he has to be pretty small. because he's able to do a spin kick inside his airstream. So that takes somebody who's a little bit more compact. So I don't know of any Asian American actors who are kind of small, but that's who I would look for, and I would try to cast an unknown in that role. And then in the Detective Harris role, I would that's a good role. He's a drunk who's kind of a mean, ornery guy. So I don't know. I haven't really thought about like who the actors were that I would cast, but I've definitely thought about this as being a movie. I think it would make a great movie because the action scenes are throughout the whole thing. And yeah, I don't know. And then the antagonist is Hispanic, and so I would want it to be true to that. I'd want the actor who played him to be a Hispanic actor, so that it would stay true to that plot point. But they'd also have to be very good at doing martial arts. So I think this movie would have to be cast with some unknowns because I can't think of any, like, Tom Cruise, I guess, was cast as Jack Reacher, so anything's possible.
Certainly.
I would definitely try to cast some unknowns if I was going to make this into a movie.
Looking forward for that, Mr. Mike.
Me too.
And
Your lips to God's ears.
yes, indeed. So, what will be your advice for those people out there who want to write their novel, memoir, or
Mm.
stories?
Well, it's tough, man. Advice is easy to give and it's tough to follow. But I would say that the key to writing any book is to do it a little bit at a time every day. Find a time in your day that is pleasant for you to write, and just dedicate each day in that time to creating like 1,000 or 1,500 words, and just churn out your first draft. That's the key. What a lot of young writers make the mistake of thinking is that first draft is the final draft, and they are upset that the first draft doesn't turn out that great. And it's like, well, the first draft is always going to suck. It's going to be a rough draft, and then the job of the writer is to rewrite and rewrite and rewrite constantly. And so that's would be what my advice would be to give yourself permission to write a mediocre first draft, and then do your best to rewrite it into a stellar final draft. And that's going to take, for me, it took me, I don't know, like 5 years to do that for this book. But it doesn't have to take that long, because as you get better and better at it, the process speeds up because you're not making the same mistakes, and it's not taking as long for you to do the process. But every day, the what do they say? Bird by bird, word by word. Just squeeze it out like toothpaste.
Certainly. Thank you for your advice, Mr. Mike. And what will be your short term and long term goals in writing?
Oh, my short term goals in writing is to just get my next um, uh, project done. I'm searching for a new project, and so I have a couple of ideas, and so that's going to be what I'm going to start working on, because it was a lot of work publishing a book and having it come out and getting it promoted and everything. And so my long-term goals is to continue my imprint, which is Merlin Makes Publishing, and continue to put out books and to give people solid books to read. And I think if you're going to publish your books, you should be realize that it's your job to do all the jobs of the publisher, which is you have to create a really solid cover that's a good working cover. You have to have an editor that edits your material and upgrades it to a level that it's readable. You have to be able to set up your interior so that it looks good and it's really fun to read, and you have to do all the marketing. So there's many hats that you have
True.
to wear, and writing is just one of them. And so yeah, my long term goals is to just continue to get better at this, because it's fun. It's a blast, and every time someone buys one of my books, it's such a thrill to think that somebody who I don't know is going to be experiencing this story that I am so in love with, and that is so great, and that the people who've read it so far have loved. And I'm excited to spread that to people, and it's a privilege and an honor to have people read your book. And so when they do, it's you smile. You think like, wow, that's everything I was hoping for when I was writing this story.
Certainly. So before we wrap up our discussion for today, Mr. Mike, I'm inviting you to please do listen to our episode with my feature author of the month of March, award-winning and best-selling author Miss Angela Henry. We will do our 4 episodes this month, so please tune in. And our first episode will be published today. So please do listen. Book 101 review, my feature author of the month of March. Of course, last month, my feature author of the month, Miss Raven Oak, also award winning and best selling author. So, Mr. Mike, if you could describe Spin Cake in just 3 words, what would they be?
I would say it's a vigilante crime thriller, and you're on the edge of your seat the whole time, and you're it's a page turner. So it's one of those books. I wanted it to be a book that if you bought it at the airport when you're about to go on a flight, you can't put it down the whole time, and you don't want the flight to end until the book ends. And that's what people who've read it have said it feels like. So I'm very pleased that that's how it turned out.
Awesome. Mr. Mike Lukas, thank you so much for sharing this pancake to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support all your boats?
Yes, you can get my books if you want to look for my website. It's Mike-Lucas, which is spelled Lukas. Mike-Lucas.com is one of my websites, and that's where you can find information about Spin Kick, and you can find information about my other books, Frog Belly Beans, which is a twisted short story collection, my Daily Joy Strategy, which is a nonfiction book about joy. And if you want to look at my comedy books, go to funnymuscle.com, and you can get all my Funny Muscle books, which are
Yes.
a book, How to Create Laughs Like a Pro. And so it's for people who are trying to break into the world of stand-up comedy.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Mike Lucas. If you support him more and more and more, empowering books to come.
And can I say
So,
also that one of the
yes,
greatest things you can do as a reader is review our books. If you
yes.
can leave a review and you can say a kind word about a book, it really trains the algorithm to help other readers find the book. So thank you in advance for everyone who's leaving a great review for this book.
Yes, people. And Mr. Mike, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
More to come, people. See you soon. So, Mr. Mike, if you have a new book, please do come over on